evening. The news gang is here tonight. Ugly, messy, and with casualties. The Jubilee divorce proceedings are on. Who will take custody of the children? Also on the show, the third opinion in politics, or is it a new alliance in the offing? Plus, the BBI scoreline, 11 down, 13 to go. Where next? On Yvonne's take, the new way of catching criminals using maize, or lack of it. On the kicker, it's a moving obituary of good manners in public life. Gashuri's punchline begins the Lenten season with a wish list, and the angle is on that ridiculous head count of tender pedestrians at Kemsa.
Honorable members, the members seated at the assembly, the total is 109. And those who voted on Zoom are 5. So it brings the total to 114 yes. No, we didn't get a vote for any abstention, neither did we get a vote for no. So the ayes have it.
All right, so that is the Nairobi County Assembly becoming the 10th county to vote yes for the BBI. Of course, after that, there was Laikipia that made it 11th. Yulanzale is our sign language gangster, and Jamila is still away tonight. We'll come back to that Nairobi and the BBI's call line a little bit later on. But ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't get more dramatic than what we've seen this last few days. And I just want us to start with what looked like a reshuffle. Wasn't a really big one, but interesting things there, Francis, in the reshuffle that was announced yesterday.
Yeah, it affected PSs and Chief Administrative Secretaries, CAS. Quite some movement. What caught my eye was, of course, the move for Belio Kipsang from Education to Regional Development. That I think is quite significant. But there's some names that are interesting, and I would say they have been placed where they probably ought to have been from the word go. Dr. Sarah Ruto going to the Ministry of Education, I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
CAS, that's a good one. And it is also interesting.
And Dr. Juan now.
Dr. Juan, PS, that's also a good one. I think there was also some questions about the fate of some CAS that we didn't see in that list. But today I've seen, for example, Rachel Shebesh, people asking whether she has been sacked or not. She's still CAS, but now she'll be in charge of public service. Lina Kilimo will be in charge of gender. So that docket now has 3 CASs. So there was some anxiety last evening when we didn't see some names and people were asking whether there have been a few CASs who are dropped. And does it also mean that probably it's a precursor to some few changes in government? I would probably say so. Immediately, maybe not. Maybe after the referendum, if we will have it sometime in June.
But one would perhaps say that, on the education one, probably the president trying to make sure that the people who are actually involved in this whole new curriculum idea, and the people who have been at the center of it, I mean, Dr. Juan, Dr. Sarah Ruto, all of those are people who have been right at the heart of KICD when this thing was being conceived and up to where it was. And I remember the other day, Yvonne, the president saying, watu wamekuwa kifanya waendelee na hiyo kitu.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Dr. Julius Juan is somebody I have interviewed, in fact, on my explainer regarding the CBC. Dr. Sarah Ruto, not just from the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development at the heart of the CBC, but has also been, an education expert, for many years, and has been from the times of Uwezo, exactly, and has been a go-to, resource, even for many of us, in this field when we wanted to understand what was happening in the education sector. And of course, following the launch of the CBC, when they were now giving us the greater detail of how that will go, I think this is a critical year for the CBC. And so it's interesting to see Dr. Julius Juan and Dr. Sarah Ruto at the heart of that. And just interesting for me to just sort of leave hanging that what was his name? Zach Kinuthia now moved
to culture,
to sports, culture, and heritage.
Interesting.
But I'll just leave that to lie.
Okay, but Linus, in the midst of this comes Ambassador Mwinzi, I hesitated because there's a real debate whether she should actually be called that just yet.
She has presented her papers to the president of South Korea already, and as per the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, she is a bona fide ambassador of Kenya to South Korea. She is not in any violation of the international law, but the debate will now be on the domestic law. Yeah. Article 132 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 requires that the president, with the approval of Parliament, makes these appointments. Now, we all know what transpired in the National Assembly when the name of Ambassador Mwinzi went there. She was rejected by Parliament because of the question of dual citizenship. So we have a situation here where Article 132 of the Constitution of Kenya has been violated by the President. But we also have a situation where she has presented her papers to the receiving country, the President of South Korea, and effectively she is ambassador. The only way of undoing this is if the President writes to revoke the appointment and recall her back home.
Which is almost inconceivable, considering that we would assume consciously appointed the ambassador. But I saw a lot of debate in Parliament, members of Parliament there saying, well, this is a dangerous precedent, and probably they have a point, because there are a lot of things on which the Constitution requires this idea of approval by Parliament, right. and there aren't too many ways of understanding that. I mean, it just means that if Parliament doesn't approve, you get someone else. So this is actually going to worry a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, and I think it'll just put, once again, and sometimes I like to say the executive, but to be more specific, the president on a collision course, not just with Parliament for its role in, approving before the appointment, but also with the courts, because Mwende Mwinzi did go to court on this issue, where she was, asking that her appointment goes through, and the court ruled on this matter. It said two things: that one, Parliament was within its mandate to question, her commitment to defending Kenya's security interests abroad, and also the court ruled that they could not force the government to deploy her, and in so doing acknowledging the role of parliamentary approval in this process. So yet again, a collision course between the president and the courts and Parliament. And it's also important to note that ambassadors are not particularly listed as state officers who are required to renounce any other citizenship before taking up a government appointment. But be that as it may, the parliamentary approval is central to the appointment of posts like the ambassadors.
And it cannot be undone in any other.
What will be interesting then is to wait for communication from the chair. Speaker Justin Muturi would have probably to guide members of Parliament on this, because as is now, I saw quite some contestation from members of Parliament. They were saying the president has no option but to go with what the National Assembly decided. The whole question of separation of powers. Parliament has its functions, the executive has its functions, the judiciary has its functions, and the drafters of the 2010 Constitution, in their wisdom, they knew why they required certain approval from the National Assembly for such certain appointments to be made. So if the National Assembly has rejected, then it means that appointment cannot go through, unless there's a very good explanation, which I don't know where it will come from.
We need to move on. Obviously, this is uncharted territory in many respects, and therefore we will really just have to wait and see.